climate change has its impacts on these systems, quite strong and profound. And then if you look at these systems, it's majority women who are working in these systems in South Asia. It's about 71% on an average, but then Nepal, is also somewhere close to that number. So that means women are significantly dependent on these agricultural systems, which are being impacted very negatively by climate change. So women are very vulnerable, given their limited access to resources, the social and gender norms that limit their mobility, their linkages, their access to services, etc. So women are being, they do get affected by climate change and what happens in the agri-food systems as a result, which means there are increasing chances of them being food insecure, nutrition insecure. If you look at the numbers, especially during the last couple of years, we had COVID, which basically meant there was a lot of restriction on the movement of food. The food prices increased, and then the Ukraine crisis as well, the conflict, that all affected Nepal quite significantly, because Nepal, if you look at the staples, which are very key, which are central for food security of this country, it still imports a lot of rice, the fine grained rice. It still imports a lot of wheat. And as a result of these restricted movements, and then when the Russia-Ukraine conflict began, India stopped exporting wheat. And then Nepal depends on Indian wheat. So that basically meant there were shortages, and as a result, the price inflation has gone up. So several women and families reported eating less nutritious diets. So that impacts quite significantly. That's kind of like a vicious circle that these women are caught in. And then Nepal also experiences high levels of outmigration of men. And as a result, actually, women are managing the agricultural farms. And then we have evidence that shows that the difference in the productivity of farms managed by men and women is on an average 24%. That is significant. If only we bridge that gap, the level of food insecurity would go down by 2 percentage points, and we can feed another 45 million more people globally. But then, given the South Asian context and Nepal, we are talking about numbers comparable to that. So I think it is important that we pay attention to gender equality in women's in agri-food systems. Look at the crisis, the stress that women are facing as a result of these multiple crises that are happening, the food crisis, the climate change, conflicts, and so on. It might not necessarily be conflict within the country. We are so globalized these days that a conflict in some other country does actually affect us. I think we need to invest in policies that actually consider gender equality as an explicit goal, because if we don't do that, most of our policies are gender neutral, if you want to be diplomatic, gender blind, if you want to be very honest about it. So unless we have explicit goals, we are not going to be address that. Nepal continues to be, I think, somewhere around 130th rank in the gender and social equality index. So we have long ways to go. It is important to look at policies. A lot of the policies that the food policy report actually suggests are very, very relevant for Nepal, given the kind of situations we are in. So I think it is important to pay attention to those. and actually make them gender responsive. And then, I think it does have a decent, a fairly good data system, but I think we need to do a lot more on that so that we have good data and evidence on which to base our policies. One thing that I have seen that has, I would say, transformed the rural landscapes in India is this whole movement of women's collectives, the self-help groups. I've also seen that happening in Bangladesh. I've seen that happening in Nepal, but maybe to a slightly lesser extent. The civil society is very, very strong in India, very robust. And I think that is really important for the government to work together with the civil society to make that happen. Civil society is, without a doubt, better at reaching out to women and some of these vulnerable groups, which the government is often not able to do for various reasons. But also private sector, very vibrant in India. And working with private sector to see how we can engage women, link them up to those supply chains. So I think a lot of collective action is happening here, but then what is it leading to? There's very little evidence of that. Is it actually leading to empowerment of women? Is it leading to resilience of women to these crises? Evidence from other parts of the world shows it does. But I think we need, and I think it does here too, but I think we need to up the game on that front a little more. And the other thing that we really need to pay attention to is the market infrastructure and linking these women to markets. Digital innovations, I think, also have sort of, have been changing, even though there is still a big divide, gender divide in digital access and inclusion. It is making a difference, and I think that's something we need to pay attention to. Interestingly, Africa seems to fare better on that front than we have in some parts of South Asia. So, market linkages, digital innovations is something we should pay attention so that we are able to economically empower these women so that they have more adaptive capacity when crises like these strike. But we also have, chronic stress, as we say, because of a number of these factors. So, for them to develop that resilience and to thrive in situations like this.